Welcome to Horrifying Obsession, where we delve into the most haunting, dark, and terrifying stories from around the world. Each episode will take you into the mysterious shadows of crime, horrifying conspiracies, and cases that have shaken entire societies. Brace yourself, because what you're about to hear is not for the faint of heart. Now, let's begin our journey to uncover the terrifying truth behind these horrifying obsessions. The dim streetlights barely illuminated the dusty road of Vinh, casting shadows in the darkened corners of the town. In a cramped room, Thang lay back on a worn-out sofa, staring absently at the ceiling. Suddenly, his phone buzzed in his pocket, breaking the silence. Thang frowned slightly, reaching into his pocket to retrieve the phone. On the screen was Huang's number, a wealthy man in the town. Thang couldn't guess the reason for the call, as Huang only contacted him for important matters. He picked up, and Huang's voice came through, clear and cold. "I have a job for you. The payment is 500 million dong." Huang's words made Thang shudder slightly. 500 million was no small amount. It was enough to change his life. Barely hiding the excitement in his voice, Thang asked, "What's the job?" Huang paused for a moment, seemingly choosing his words carefully. Finally, he spoke bluntly, devoid of emotion. "Murder." Thang's heart skipped a beat. He stammered, "Murder who?" Huang calmly replied, "A woman." The room seemed to freeze, Huang's words cutting through Thang's thoughts like a cold blade. 500 million dong, an amount too large to refuse, but to kill someone? Cold sweat formed on Thang's forehead. "Let me think about it," he said quickly, trying to buy time. Huang curtly replied, "You have half an hour." The call ended with the harsh beeps of disconnection ringing in Thang's ears. He let his hand fall, the phone slipping from his grasp and hitting the floor. His eyes fixed blankly on the space in front of him, his mind swirling, his heart pounding in his chest. Thang knew he couldn't do this alone. That was his first thought. He needed someone to consult, someone he could trust to share this burden. Quickly scrolling through his contacts, Thang found Dat's number, his closest friend since childhood. Dat was reckless but smart, someone who had pulled Thang out of tight spots more than once. "Hey Dat, I need to talk. Are you free?" Thang asked urgently. On the other end, Dat sensed the tension in his friend's voice and replied, "What's so urgent? Tell me." Thang lowered his voice, trying to keep it brief, though his unease was clear. "Huang just called me. He wants to hire me to kill someone. The pay is huge, but murder." Dat exclaimed in shock, his voice filled with tension. "Are you out of your mind? Who does he want you to kill?" Thang answered, "A woman. I don't know who. He just said that and told me to think about it for half an hour." There was a brief silence before Dat spoke, his voice serious. "We need to talk to Huang face to face. I don't like this at all. This is no joke." Thang agreed, and the two arranged to meet Huang at a small roadside eatery. That evening, Thang and Dat sat in the eatery, their anxious eyes glancing out at the rainy night, waiting for Huang's arrival. The door creaked open, and a gust of cold wind blew in, carrying the dampness of the rain with it. Huang stepped inside, his hair soaked, clothes clinging to his body, gripping a gleaming knife tightly. The reflection of the light on the blade gave it a menacing glow. His unexpected entrance and calm demeanor added tension to the already heavy atmosphere. Thang and Dat exchanged uneasy glances. Huang placed the knife on the table, his voice steady but cold. "Are you both ready?" Thang took a deep breath, trying to keep his voice steady. "But we need the money up front." Huang narrowed his eyes, his gaze sharp as it swept across their faces. "The money will come once the job is done," he said bluntly, without hesitation. "We can't do it without a guarantee," Dat interjected, his voice firm, trying to conceal his nervousness. Huang sneered, leaning slightly forward, his voice hard. "Who do you think I am? This isn't a game. If you want the money, you have to earn it." The room seemed to grow quieter after that statement, with only the sound of rain pattering against the window. Huang began detailing the plan. "The target is a woman. She'll be at her apartment tonight. We'll get there early, lay low at the entrance, and wait for the right moment." Thang nodded, though doubt still lingered in his heart. He knew the apartment Huang was referring to, an old complex with a sophisticated security camera system. "We can't do it there," Thang interrupted firmly. "That apartment is covered with cameras. If we strike there, we'll be easily caught." Huang's expression turned slightly annoyed, but after a brief silence, he conceded and changed the plan. Fine, if you say so. We'll move to plan B. Huang drove them to a supermarket where the target worked. The car sped through narrow streets lined with closed shops, only a few dim lights reflecting on puddles from the rain. When the car came to a stop, Huang pointed toward the supermarket. She works here. She'll be off at 9 p.m. You two will block her path, pretend it's a robbery, and accidentally kill her. The police will think it's a robbery gone wrong, making it harder to investigate. Thang and Dat exchanged looks. They understood that things were getting more serious by the minute, yet neither dared to refuse. If we do this, you'll transfer the money right afterward, right? Thang asked, trying to keep his tone calm. Yes, as soon as the job is done, you'll get paid, Huang affirmed before retreating into his car. I'll come back after it's done, he said, before driving away, leaving Thang and Dat standing in the rain. Thang turned to Dat, his voice filled with worry. What do you think? Dat furrowed his brow and replied, We can't trust him, but we've come this far. We can't just quit now. Remember the money. Thang and Dat stood outside the supermarket, their eyes anxiously watching each person who exited. It was now past 9:30 p.m., yet the target still hadn't appeared. The rain had eased, but the air felt heavier. They glanced at each other, their unease growing. What do you think? Dat muttered, his hand gripping the knife in his pocket. Maybe Huang lied, or he has another plan. Thang frowned, his sense of unease intensifying. I don't know, but we can't just stand here forever, he said, and decided to call Huang. As the phone rang, Thang's heart raced. Finally, Huang's voice came through, cold and impatient. What now? Thang quickly explained. The target hasn't left the supermarket. Are you sure she works here? Huang was silent for a moment, then sighed, his tone curt. Fine, I'm on my way back. A few minutes later, Huang's car screeched to a halt in front of the supermarket. He stepped out, his face tense, phone in hand, and dialed the target's number. Thang and Dat watched, surprised and curious. The call connected, and a woman's voice came through, cold and resolute. What do you want now? Huang's voice was low, almost strained. Where are you? Why haven't you come home yet? The woman's voice grew sharper. I need the house key. You took it, and now you're asking me where I am. What's your plan? In the brief silence that followed, Thang and Dat exchanged glances, realizing that this situation was far more complicated than Huang had initially described. This woman wasn't some random target, she was his wife. Huang's face twisted in frustration, but he kept his voice steady. Fine, I'll bring the key to you. Wait a moment. The call ended, and Thang and Dat immediately confronted Huang. Thang's voice was firm. She's your wife, isn't she? Why didn't you tell us from the start? Huang finally confessed. Yes, she's my wife. I suspect she's cheating on me, and I want her dead. Both Thang and Dat were stunned by Huang's admission. What had started as a simple murder plot had now evolved into something far more dangerous and personal. Grinding his teeth, Dat glared at Huang. Are you insane? How can you even think of killing your wife just because of suspicion? Huang shouted back, his voice filled with hatred. You don't understand. I've lost all control. If I don't kill her, my life is over. With no other options, all three agreed to change the plan. They discussed for a while, and Huang proposed a new approach. We'll wait somewhere else and catch her when she goes out shopping. She usually goes out late to buy things. We'll find an opportunity tonight. Thang and Dat reluctantly agreed, but just as the car started moving again, Huang received another call from his wife. Her voice was calm but cold. You don't need to bring the key anymore. I'll stay at a friend's house tonight. The call ended, and the atmosphere in the car grew even heavier and more suffocating. Huang slammed his fist against the steering wheel in fury, causing the car to shake. The plan is ruined again, he hissed through clenched teeth, his face twisted in rage. We need a different plan. Dat shook his head, feeling powerless in the face of Huang's erratic behavior. We can't keep doing this. Every time you change the plan, we're taking on more risk. After 3 failed attempts to carry out the murder, Huang returned home, seething with anger, muttering curses and smashing objects around the room. The failure not only left him frustrated, but also made him feel humiliated. He knew he had to act quickly and come up with a more cunning and foolproof plan. He couldn't let the situation drag on any longer. Fear and doubt gnawed at him, growing with each passing day. The next morning, Huang decided to take a bold new step. He drove his black car to find Thang and Dat. "Get in the car," Huang shouted, his voice tense and decisive. Thang and Dat exchanged looks, then silently got into the car without further questions. They could feel the thick tension in the air as the car sped through the narrow streets of Vinh and headed toward a remote mountain road where no one was likely to pass by. Huang parked the car in a secluded spot and turned to face his two accomplices with a cold, sharp gaze. "We'll lie in wait here. I'll find a way to lure her here. Once she's dead, we'll bury the body right here. No one will know. No one will see." Thang and Dat looked around the desolate mountain road. The location was perfect for a murder with no trace left behind. Dense trees surrounded them, no houses or streetlights in sight. If someone were to be killed here, it would take a long time before the body was discovered, if it was ever found at all. "How do you plan to lure her here?" Dat asked, his eyes fixed on Huang. Huang smirked. "Simple. I'll tell her my car broke down and that I need her to bring the repair tools. She won't suspect anything." The plan seemed reasonable, but both Thang and Dat felt increasingly uneasy. They had spent many sleepless nights reflecting on their situation, slowly coming to the realization that committing murder was a crime that couldn't be forgiven, and escaping the law would be nearly impossible. On top of that, they began to fear that Huang would cheat them out of the money once the job was done, or worse, that he might kill them to cover his tracks. After Huang finished outlining his plan, he stepped out of the car to begin preparing. "I'll be back in an hour," he said, then drove off, leaving Thang and Dat standing in the cold, desolate mountain road. But as soon as Huang was out of sight, Thang turned to Dat, his tone serious. "We can't keep going like this. Huang has lost his mind. He wants to kill his wife, and he might kill us to silence us." Dat nodded in agreement. "You're right. We need to act before it's too late. We're not going to kill anyone for a madman like him." Thang forced a grim smile. "Then let's trick him. We'll take the money and disappear. He can't report us to the police because he's guilty too." The two quickly devised a new plan. Instead of ambushing Huang's wife and carrying out the murder, they decided to return to town and warn her about her husband's murderous intentions. They hoped that by confronting her directly, they could expose Huang's scheme and use it to extort him for the promised money without having to follow through with the crime. They hurried back to town, determined not to waste any more time. Both were exhausted by the constant shifting of plans and the pressure of being involved in Huang's deadly game. They figured that deceiving Huang would be safer and less risky than going through with his murderous plot. They found the supermarket where Huang's wife worked and entered, their minds racing with thoughts of how to approach her. On the way, Thang wondered whether they were putting themselves in even more danger by revealing the plot. But a part of him felt relieved that they had chosen to abandon the plan to kill. Dat, though maintaining a calm exterior, couldn't shake the feeling of unease deep within him. They knew that things had become far more complicated than they had ever imagined. Thang and Dat quickly entered the supermarket, scanning the area for their target, Huang's wife. It didn't take long for them to spot her, a slender woman with long black hair standing behind the cashier counter, her eyes focused on the computer screen. The harsh white light of the fluorescent bulbs reflected on her face, highlighting the hidden signs of fatigue and worry. Thang and Dat exchanged glances and nodded in silent determination. They approached her, trying to appear as calm as possible. Thang lowered his voice, speaking softly but carefully. "Hello, ma'am. I'm Thang, and this is Dat. We're here to talk to you about something very important concerning your husband, Huang." The woman looked up, her eyes filled with a mix of surprise and suspicion. She didn't know who these men were, but the mention of Huang's name made her more cautious, her sharp gaze examining the two strangers standing before her. "What's this about my husband?" she asked, her voice steady but tinged with wariness. Dat stepped in, lowering his voice even further. "We don't have much time. Your husband wants to kill you. He hired us to do it. But we've decided not to go through with it because we realized this is too dangerous. You need to leave immediately." The woman furrowed her brow, her eyes now flashing with disbelief and irritation. Are you kidding me? I don't even know who you are, and there's no reason for me to believe this crazy story. She scoffed, as if she had just heard a bad joke. Seeing this, Thang pulled out the gleaming knife from his coat pocket, holding it up for her to see. This is the knife Hong gave us to kill you. Do you still think we're joking? The woman flinched, her eyes widening in shock at the sight of the knife. But instead of panic, she let out a cold, disdainful laugh. This could easily be a scam. Are you two trying to scare me into giving you money? My husband and I have only been married for 2 years, and we have a daughter who's just over a year old. I've never had an affair, and there's no reason he would want to kill me. This is absurd. Dat, growing more impatient, shot her a serious look and raised his voice. We're not making this up. He suspects you of being unfaithful. He's told us everything about you. If you don't believe us, you'll see for yourself soon enough. At that moment, the woman's phone rang. She glanced at the screen and saw her husband's name. She answered the call with her usual calm voice. Hello? Hong's voice came through the line, trying to sound composed. My car broke down on the mountain road, and I couldn't call for help. Can you bring the toolbox from home to help me? The woman stared intently at the two men in front of her, torn between disbelief and suspicion. The phone call, combined with the story the two strangers had just told, left her feeling that something wasn't right. Why would Hong need her to bring repair tools when he could easily call for roadside assistance? She thought for a moment and then asked, Where are you? I'll bring them. Hong replied, On the mountain road behind town, near the old abandoned inn. Hurry, it's going to rain hard soon. She ended the call, but a vague sense of dread began to creep in. Turning to Thang and Dat, her eyes still showed traces of doubt, but now there was also a hint of concern. If what you're saying is true, then what should I do? Thang emphasized, We don't intend to harm you. We only want to take Hong's money and disappear. Come with us and hide for a while. We'll use your phone to pretend you're dead and get the money from him. The woman stood silent for a moment, her mind spinning with conflicting thoughts of truth and uncertainty. If I go with you, how do I know you won't hurt me? She asked, her tone challenging. Dat shrugged. We've told you everything we know. If we wanted to harm you, we wouldn't have warned you like this. After a brief pause, she finally said, All right, I'll go. But if you're lying to me, you'll regret it. Thang and Dat nodded in agreement, feeling slightly relieved that they had succeeded in persuading her. Now, all they had to do was keep her safe and carry out their plan. They now sat together in a dimly lit room at a small motel in Vinh. The yellowish light cast shadows on the damp, peeling walls. Thang and Dat sat across from Hong's wife. Thang started, his voice calm but tinged with unease. We don't want to kill you. Our goal is simply to get Hong's money and disappear. We've told you the truth, and now we need your cooperation to gather evidence. Hong's wife, still remarkably composed, looked at the two men in front of her, her sharp eyes calculating. She sensed sincerity in their words, but she also knew she was in a dangerous situation. What do you want me to do? She asked, her tone firm but controlled. Dat jumped in. We need you to hand over your phone. We'll use it to send a message to Hong, telling him that you're dead. That's the best way to confirm what he truly wants. The woman stared at them for a long moment before responding. No, I won't give you my phone. If you're telling the truth, I'll send the message myself and monitor everything. But I need solid proof that you're not planning to harm me. And if Hong really wants me dead, I'll pay you twice what he promised. Thang and Dat exchanged glances and then nodded. All right, we agree, Thang said. We don't want any more trouble than we already have. Once they had reached an agreement, they started to plan their next steps. With trembling hands, Hong's wife took out her phone and prepared to send the message. Under the dim light, her fingers flew across the keyboard, trying to maintain her composure before things got worse. She typed, The target is dead. Do you want to come see the body? She hesitated for a moment, exhaled deeply, and hit send. The three of them stared at the screen, waiting for Hong's reply. The room fell into complete silence. They could hear each other's steady breathing, mingled with the sound of the rain tapping against the window. After about a minute, the phone buzzed, and a message from Hong appeared. "No need to check. Just get rid of the body. I'll transfer the money as promised." After reading the message, Hong's wife's face turned pale, her lips quivering. There was no longer any doubt. Her husband truly wanted her dead. She lifted her head, her eyes filled with hurt and anger. "He really wants to kill me," she whispered, her voice filled with bitterness and disappointment. "I didn't believe you, but now I know I was wrong." Thang gave a slight nod, trying to remain calm. "See, we have no intention of harming you. Now, you need to help us get the money. Then, all three of us can get out of here safely." Hong's wife looked at them for a long time before finally nodding in agreement. "I'll go withdraw the money. You two wait here," she said, rising from her seat and quickly leaving the room, leaving Thang and Dat to wait with growing apprehension. They believed she would follow through with their plan, but in such a tense situation, they knew anything could happen. An hour passed, then nearly 2 hours. Inside the waiting room, Thang and Dat's patience was wearing thin. Did she trick us? Thang began to worry. Where is she? Why is she taking so long? Just then, the door flew open, but instead of Hong's wife, a group of police officers stormed into the room. "Hands up! You're under arrest!" one officer shouted, his gun pointed directly at Thang and Dat. The two men were too stunned to react, and within moments, they were handcuffed and restrained. Thang cried out, "We didn't kill anyone. We just wanted the money." But no one was listening. The door slammed shut behind them as they were dragged out of the room. Outside, the rain was pouring down heavily. In the faint streetlight, Hong's wife stood watching, her eyes filled with resolve. She had gone straight to the police station and reported everything. Now she knew exactly who wanted her dead, and she was ready to confront the man who had betrayed her trust. Hong was also apprehended soon after, caught while attempting to flee. All three were taken to the police station, but their fates had already been sealed. The dark plot had unraveled under the light of truth. Thang and Dat sat opposite the investigating officer, their hands tightly bound to the chairs, their eyes filled with fear and exhaustion. Meanwhile, Hong sat in a separate room, his face pale, his eyes vacant, as though all the life had drained out of him. Hong's wife had done exactly as she had planned. After leaving the motel, she went straight to the nearest police station, where she reported the entire situation. She recounted every detail of Hong's plan, his intent to kill her, and his increasingly erratic behavior over the past few days. The police quickly mobilized, and within an hour, they had stormed the motel and arrested Thang and Dat. Hong was captured on the road, trying to make his escape. At the police station, under the harsh interrogation lights, Hong had no choice but to confess to everything. He hung his head, his voice trembling and weak, admitting that there had never been any infidelity on his wife's part. It was all a product of his warped mind, distorted by despair and financial ruin. He had become obsessed with the idea that his wife was controlling his life too tightly, and the only way to regain his freedom was to eliminate her. Hong confessed that he had spiraled into debt from gambling, losing hundreds of millions of dong, and the pressure of funding his sister-in-law's wedding had driven him to the edge of madness. Hong recounted his descent into despair with a broken voice. "I thought she was going to leave me for someone else. I thought that if I didn't kill her, I'd never escape her nagging and control." The investigator looked Hong in the eye, his voice stern. "Did you really think murder was the only solution? There was no evidence of your wife's infidelity. Everything you believed was in your head, and now you must face the consequences of your irrational actions." In a separate interrogation room, Thang and Dat sat across from another officer. Although they knew they had escaped the horror of committing murder, they were still terrified of the consequences awaiting them. They confessed everything, from accepting Hong's offer to kill, to their final decision to abandon the murder plan and try to save Hong's wife. They hoped their change of heart would earn them some leniency. The officer nodded after hearing their confession and said, "You've committed the crime of attempted murder, but since you abandoned the plan and cooperated with the victim, your sentences may be reduced." The officer nodded after hearing their confession and said, "You've committed the crime of attempted murder, but since you abandoned the plan and cooperated with the victim, your sentences may be reduced. The trial at Vinh court took place on a crisp early morning in 2024. The courtroom was packed with people, and the tension was palpable. Reporters, local residents, and relatives of those involved were present, their eyes fixed on every detail of the proceedings. The judge, seated high above the courtroom, looked down at the three defendants, his face stern, his voice booming with authority. After reviewing all the evidence, the defendants' statements, and the defense's arguments, the court finds the defendant Hong guilty of attempted murder and sentences him to 10 years in prison. This sentence had been reduced because Hong's wife had submitted a letter requesting leniency for her husband. She sat in the audience, her eyes filled with sadness, but also a hint of forgiveness. Despite being betrayed and nearly murdered, she had decided to ask for a lighter sentence for her husband's sake. "I cannot forgive what he did, but for the sake of our daughter, I hope he can change and become a better father when he's released from prison," she said in her statement to the court. The judge continued, "As for the defendants Thang and Dat, the court recognizes that both men were involved in an attempted murder, but since they abandoned their plan and came forward with their intentions, the court will not pursue criminal charges. However, both defendants will be fined 50 million dong each for fraud and attempted extortion." Thang and Dat let out a sigh of relief, feeling as if a tremendous weight had been lifted off their shoulders. They realized they had narrowly escaped a far worse punishment and were now given a chance to start their lives over again. However, they both knew that their reputations and lives would never be the same. After the trial, Hong was escorted back to prison. His head hung low, his face pale and lifeless, all traces of his former arrogance and pride gone. He had lost everything: his freedom, his love, and the respect of his family and community. He realized that his poor decisions and selfishness had led him down a dark and inescapable path. What do you think about this case, about the act of killing one's wife just out of suspicion of infidelity? Leave your thoughts below so we can discuss them together. Thank you for watching Horrifying Obsession. If you're fascinated by the terrifying stories we share, don't forget to hit like and subscribe so you won't miss any upcoming episodes. Share this video if you think it's worth spreading. We'll be back with more dark stories in the future. See you in the next episode, and always stay vigilant, because horrifying things can happen all around us.